So we're going to recap a little bit what we're up to, and I'll try and do it for my benefit as much as for your benefit, to sort of get my mind back into the discussion and the things we're talking about. They were quite deep. If we don't work on it, it's like stretching. You know, if you haven't exercised in a while, you got to stretch a little bit. So let's go back and examine some of the discussions we had. We're in Shaar Hayichud v'Hamuna. We're in the Tanya, the second section, where we're discussing the idea of the oneness of God. The mitzvah, there's a mitzvah in the Torah where God says to have faith not just in God, but have a faith and know that there's only one God. And we're discussing what does that mean to know there's one God? What does that mean? So we'll start off with a famous verse where it says, Ata hareis ladas, you have come to show us. The verse also says, V'yadaita hayayim v'ashaveis la'lavecha, you shall know that there's only one God. No one else underneath the heavens or underneath the earth. There's only one God. And the question is, what did we think? That there's someone else? That there's another guy behind the scenes? You know, sometimes you have certain politicians that need someone behind the scenes giving direction, but no current stuff intended. But what does it mean that God is the only God? And know that, not just know it. Work on yourself. Take the time to think deeply and come to that conclusion that there's only one God. So, to understand this, we're explaining really, it's not just to know that there's only one God. It's to explain that there's no other source of any power, life, existence, sustenance aside from God. There's only one source. Sometimes a person can have, in certain things in life, we know there's more than one source. For an example, you have certain devices that you have a choice. You can plug it in or use a battery. You know, certain devices you have a choice, like a phone or certain types of flashlights or computers. You can either use a power source within, or you can plug it in without. There's more than one source. Certain things have more than one way they come to an existence, you know. But when it comes to existence at its truth, we have to know there's only one source, God. But that was still a general idea in Kabbalah. What's the novelty of the Alter Rebbe? And this is what we're going to remind ourselves today. It's something we learned in chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But we're going to go remind ourselves, what is a novelty? What was the incredible teaching of the Alter Rebbe that we're doing here? So we first went on to explain the concept of Hashem Hu Elikim. Because the verse says, V'ashaveis lavecha, ki Hashem Hu Elikim, God is God, or Havaya is Elikim. What does this mean? So the truth is, in order for Hashem to create something in this world, the only way to create in this world an existence which seems to appear to be an existence, because everything is God. In order for there to be something that appears to be an existence, which means it didn't exist before. Everything that we have in a process, usually it existed in a certain level here. A fruit tree, the seeds came and they developed into something else. You have light from a sun, light from a flashlight, and it flows down to a new place. We're asking now, or we want now, there to be an existence that didn't exist before. Why? Until now, all that existed was God. Now we want something other to exist. Human beings, creation, trees, planets. Where is that going to come from? How will there be something existing that's not a natural process? Because natural processes, nothing can exist that's other from God. So you want something to exist that will appear what we call yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. God is the ultimate nothingness. We know one of the famous, beautiful prayers that we have, we say it every single day, is the 121, the Rebbe's chapter. The Rebbe's chapter at Tehillim, we ask, the King David says, Shir Mailes, he says, May ayin yave ezri, from where will my help come? And Chassidus answers, the answer is in the question. May ayin, from that which is not, meaning from Hashem. Hashem is the ultimate ayin. Ayin means nothing. Can't be described, can't be qualified, can't be put in parameters, can't be measured. May ayin, you know where your help comes from? May ayin, from the ultimate nothingness, from God, which is ultimately not describable. So the question, may ayin yavi ezri, from where shall my help come? That's the answer, may ayin. So when we want to create yesh may ayin, something that appears to be something from nothing, it is a spiritually, physically, and chemically, and everything impossibility. Scientifically impossible, unless we tap into what's called Hashem's Chesed. Hashem's Chesed, which we also will call Havaya, God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei. That source is such a powerful source. If it's diluted, unfiltered, from that source can be created something which is new. It is the power of the essence of God, called Havaya, that has the ability to create something that didn't exist before. And something that is counterintuitive to God's existence. It's counter to everything that we know. God is everything, and nothing else can exist. God's going to create something that could exist. Man, a world, a universe, planets. So that power is only possible from the level called Chesed, or we call it Havaya. Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the first point. The second point is, now for that created being to exist, we have to hide Havaya. Why? It's like the light of the sun. Where can light of the sun exist? Only at the furthest distance from the sun. Here, 93 million miles away, we can feel the light of the sun. If you would take a spaceship and travel into the sun, if you can get that far, that close, you will cease to find light. Light no longer exists. All you see is the sun. Meaning, in order for something to exist on some level, it has to be distant from its source. The way it's found within its source, it can't exist, like the light of the sun. A created being that Hashem creates cannot exist when God's presence is found there. Certainly the essence of God of Chesed. So at the same exact time, the power to create, to exist, is the power of Chesed. The actual ability to exist comes from Gevurah Elikim, concealment. Hashem has to conceal himself. So now Hashem has to do the magic trick of at the same exact time having Chesed, which gives the power to exist and continuously has to come into existence, has to have this energy to continually make whatever he created exist. Let's take this cup of tea, for example. For this cup of tea to exist, it has to come from the power of Chesed that it exists, because really all that's there is God. And then for the cup of tea not to become into existence, but to identify or be seen as a separate existence, is only possible. Hashem is concealed. So you have to have Elikim. That means in order for creation to happen, you have to have two opposite powers come into play. The power to create something which is not absolute God, or it doesn't appear to be, and the power at the same time to conceal that really what you see here is just an expression of godliness. For it to appear as something for itself, it must be concealed. So you have two powerful sources involved in creation, Havaya and Elikim, Chesed and Gvura. So basically, in order for there to exist this reality, there has to be Havaya and Elikim together. That being said, a person might think now Hashem has two things. And this is where we have to really listen carefully to what we're saying, and to what the Alter was telling us. It's not just that there are two powers, Havaya and Elikim. We have to be convinced that Havaya and Elikim are all one. That we couldn't tell ourselves Havaya and Elikim are one. We have to know there's no such a thing as Elikim separate from Havaya, which means there really is no existence. Meaning, what does it mean, Ein Oid? The word Oid means other, something else. The idea of the pasuk is, this is what it says, to know, Ki Havaya hu Elikim Ein Oid. There does not exist anything else. Nothing else exists, even the Elikim that we see, that's really Havaya. So why do we call it Elikim? Because it appears that way to us. But in truth, there is no Elikim, there is no separate. In other words, the identity and the existence of this cup of tea is only a way it appears, but in truth, there is no cup of tea here. Why? Because the cup of tea only exists if Elikim is a separate reality, if concealment is a separate truth. But if concealment is not a separate truth, if concealment is not anything other than one with Havaya, one with Chesed, then the cup can't exist. So the ultimate dimension and definition of know that Hashem, Hu Elikim, and nothing else exists, is to realize that the power of Elikim that we talked about in the first few chapters of Tanya, it doesn't truly give room for something to exist. It's only a concept or an idea, as we'll see in a minute. But the truth is, Havaya Hu Elikim, there is no Elikim, and nothing else exists besides God. That is the ultimate in understanding of Havaya Elikim. And we can talk about that at length in a moment. But first, I just want to give a prerequisite of a comment and say, a reminder, obviously in chapter 7, we're going to address, but 1 second, but the cup of tea is here. So how do we explain that? That's how we get to Yichudil and Yichudata. So the cup of tea, at the end of the day, does exist in our world. But in the world of truth, in the world of God, in the world of absolute truth, there's no cup of tea and there's no universe. Why? Because in the realm of Havaya, that power, when it's revealed to create, does not allow anything to exist, just like within the center of the sun or on the surface of the sun, how the sun's biological makeup is. But in the sun, you can't point to and say, here's the light of the sun. Why not? because nothing exists within the sun except the sun itself. Even though millions of miles away, the sun does exist, and the fact that it exists here means it was there too, because it can't be here for millions of miles away, less than it was, meaning so much diminished. It can't exist at all here if it didn't exist in the sun. But the fact is, in the sun you can't find it. Why? Because in its source everything is batel. In front of Havaya, in front of Chesed, nothing exists. And this is a deeper dimension that we explained in chapter 3 and 4, explaining the idea that on one hand, Havaya is the power to create, and Elikim is the power to conceal, so that which was created, can come into an existence. And the mitzvah now of Havaya Hu Elikim means you should just know that when we told you the Havaya Elikim, that's all in perception, or we'll get to what it means in a minute. But in truth, there is no Elikim separate from Havaya, which means there really is no concealment. And that's the ultimate definition we have to know for the beginning of this chapter, the section. There is no true Elikim separate from Havaya, which means there really is no concealment, which means anything that exists only appears that way. Now we have the big question. But we're here. If you knock your foot and you stub your toe, you bang your head, it hurts. If you eat a lot of cookies, you get fat. What I mean, it's so that's how we get now into Yichud. So chapter 7, this is what we're up to in the Tanya. Let's now take a moment and examine what chapter 7 came to introduce. And chapter 7 came to introduce our world. What does it mean, our world? As follows. I want to take a moment before we go further to acknowledge and recognize that today is the 6th day of the month of Av. It is the first yahrzeit of Rabbi Yael Khan. Yael Khan was the Rebbe's personal chayzer, the one who repeated the Rebbe's sichos. And around the world today, there are hundreds and some very big ones, meetings and gatherings on Zoom and in person, honoring this great chassid. He was an extraordinary person that was the Rebbe's funnel, so to speak. He was the Rebbe's tube. Everything the Rebbe said and taught, he explained and transmitted and transcribed. He wrote up the Maimarim and prepared them for the Rebbe to edit. And he basically is Chassidus, and as the Rebbe's, so to speak, funnel or conduit. And his passing was a really big deal because there's no one on par with him, no one even close. So today on his yahrzeit, there's a lot of programs sharing and talking about his style of teaching and his metaphors, his examples, how he explained very deep ideas. And he was a brilliant chassid that you didn't have to be a chassid to appreciate it. Many thousands of his students were non-Lubavitch, non-chassidim, but they appreciated his tremendous brilliance that was not on par with anything that we know, and his knowledge of the whole Talmud and everything. And he was a computer that had everything in there, and a brilliant analysis and the power to explain things clearly, and which is incredible. And actually, I prepare these classes each week using his. Thank God we have thousands of hours of his classes. He gives a class on Tanya, but primarily I used to prepare this because it's a very not easy subject to say, put it mildly. So he explains things very clear. Anyway, so we'll learn his for his zechus, and hopefully we'll have a little bit to grow and learn from the way he explains the Rebbe's teachings and all the Rebbe's teachings. Okay, so chapter 7 goes like this. Chapter 7 introduces a new idea. Until now, we focused on two names of Hashem: Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, and Elikim, which is Gvura. So Chesed and Gvura. The truth is, it says, my flesh, I can know God. To go and examine within ourselves, when I say our flesh, doesn't just mean our physical flesh, which is a big deal. To understand the components of the body, understands godliness, but also the makeup of our soul, our identity. Our soul is made up of 10 powers. Chachma, Bina, Das are the cognitive abilities of our soul. And that's how we start the process of Machshava and thinking from Chachma, Bina, and Das. And then we have also the midas, the character traits, the emotive traits, which are Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayid, and Yesod. The three cognitive, and 6 emotives. The 7th emotion, the 7th trait is not really an emotion. It's really expressing all that came before it. It's called Malchus. Malchus is the ability to express what I have inside me to others. See, emotions are my feelings that I have. True, all my emotions relate to other people in general. It says in the Chassidus that in general, for intellect, you don't need other human beings in the world. If you only had intellectual, cognitive abilities, we have no need for other human beings. I could think. As a matter of fact, if no one's around on an island, I can think the best. The less people in the room, the better I think. Emotions require other people to express them. Someone you love, someone you feel sad for, someone you're angry at, someone you want to be kind to, someone that you're feeling revenge. All the feelings, all emotions are related to other people. But even though they're related to other people, they take place within yourself. When a person develops a love or a feeling for anything, or a fear, or whatever feeling it might be, it actually changes your character. It actually has an effect on your refining or making yourself more coarse. That which you are attracted to, that which you are longing after, that which you like, that which you dislike, all affects and changes you. A person that goes around being jealous of other people, being angry at other people, being vindictive, whatever the word is, you're becoming a coarse person that's changing your character. A person that's kind and sensitive, it changes you. So emotions are very much going on within you, and they're actually very important. They actually transform you. Love and fear of God are actually inside activities going on within us. It's tremendously personal. When it comes to speech, the only reason you need speech is for other. I have no need for speech for myself, even though when you do speak, it benefits you. We spoke many times that when someone expresses something in thought, it draws down deep intellectual abilities. If someone's trying to understand something, start talking about it, and you'll see the information will come down from your brain, from deep inside your soul, even that's beyond your brain. Same with emotions. If someone talks about something which hurts, they'll start crying. Why? Because now I'm talking about it, it draws down. But the bottom line is, words are only needed for someone else. You don't need to have words if there's nobody else on the planet. You could think. So the point is, words are really something outside of yourself. Malchus is words. When you want to talk about the synonyms for words, you have Malchus, you have Adonai, the third name of Hashem we'll talk about, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, is Adonai, and Dibur. So Dibur, Malchus, and Adonai is all one thing. Speech, the level of God called Adonai, and Malchus is all one. Why is Malchus considered to be something which is like Dibur? Because the definition of Malchus, and this is how we're going to explain in this chapter also the why. In this chapter 7, we explain why did Hashem create the world in such a way? Why did Hashem need to make the world where it exists and it appears to be independent for itself? Because it does. The reality is we do have a world here. So why is it that way? And the answer is Malchus only works. A king can only be a king if you see a father can be a father on his own children. Any person could be a mother, could be a brother. You could be relating to people who are part of you. A king can only be a king with those who are disconnected from him. Not just other people, but they have to be strangers. For example, a king who only has family is not really a king, just has a big family and is a rich guy. To be a king, you have to have people that are not your family, not your close friends, not your ministers, not your officers, and those people become your subjects. So the definition of a king is only possible with other. For Hashem to tap into this level of being a king, Hashem could only have that possible if he created somehow other. So how does Hashem create other? So let's take a couple points here. Number one is that Hashem has to have other. He has to have other, that's Malchus, and that's what speech is. You have to have other. If I want to talk, I need someone to talk to. There used to be, if someone was talking in the street, nobody was there, you thought they should seek help. Now they're probably on an earpiece, now they're on the phone. I remember as a kid, there was a guy who used to talk to himself a lot. We were scared of him. Today, people walk down the street all the time. What are you talking about? I told you. I'm like, who's he talking to? And as he's talking to his ear. But the reality is, speech is only needed for someone else. And that's the name Adonai. Adonai is the God's level of expressing to other. Now, this idea, I started saying before, only exists in Hashem's Malchus. Let's take a little view into Hashem's creation of the world in the world of Chachma, Bina, Das, etc. When Hashem created the world, once he started into actual worlds, not just the lights and the energies, but the worlds, the first world is Atsilos. Atsilos is the first of the four worlds. In the world of Atsilos, there is no Malchus until the last stage. Malchus exists at the very end of Atsilos as it begins the process of Beriah. So really, in all of the worlds, the Chachma of Atsilos, and the Bina of Atsilos, and the Das of Atsilos, and even the emotions, Chesed of Atsilos, and Gvur of Atsilos, all those levels are really all how the world exists in Hashem's perspective. In other words, where there is no world. So when we talk about what I said before, that Hayichud Elokim in its ultimate state, that's how it is naturally in the world of Atsilos. In the world of Atsilos, it says, there is no vessels separate from the lights. The vessels and the lights of Atsilos are all one. So in the world of Atsilos, That's how it is. There is no cup of tea in Atsilos. There's no planets in Atsilos. There's no trees in Atsilos. There's no human beings in Atsilos. There's no angels in Atsilos. There's nobody in Atsilos. Why? Because in Atsilos, you don't exist as a separate entity. So when we say that Hashem's reality is Havayahu Elikim, naturally, that's not talking about what we are here. That's talking about how it exists in the world of Atsilos. So when we say naturally Havayahu Elikim, that Elikim is not really a separate existence, there is no concealment, and therefore there is no real existence of anything other than God, that's the world of Atsilos. Enter Malchus of Atsilos. Once you go through this channel of Malchus Atsilos, like a baby being born. I do exist. I'm here. And I appear to exist. Don't worry, we're going to get to the end of chapter 7, and we're going to challenge all this and explain it much deeper. But I do exist, and I do have an identity, and this is the world of Malchus and beyond. So from Malchus Atsilos, that is where we are. So the answer to our question is that we have, if we believe and know the truth is Havayahu Elikim, there is no separate thing called Elikim, which means there is no concealment. So nothing exists. So where are we? We're after Malchus of Atsilos. After Malchus of Atsilos, the world does come into an existence. It doesn't come to a place where we feel our identity. From Hashem's perspective, in the world of Atsilos, he doesn't live in the Malchus. Hashem sees the truth. There is no other entity. But from Malchus to Atsilos, there begins a separate entity called existence. And there is planets, and there is people, there is all the processes of creation. So all that begins from the level of Malchus and beyond. Therefore, now we can enter and go back to the very beginning of this chapter. The very beginning of this chapter was saying that there's a mitzvah called V'yadaita Hayim, V'ashavei Salavavecha, Ki Havayahu Elikim. You should know in your heart and work on yourself to do a mitzvah. No, Hashem is and Hashem Elikim is one. This is where the mitzvah starts. See, before Atsilos, in Atsilos, before Malchus, there can't be a mitzvah. So I'm telling you, there's a mitzvah to make this room light. It's light already. No, but make a light. It's light already. I can't have a mitzvah to make this room light. Go into a dark room. There I could say, make this room light. I'll flick on the switch. Now the light's on. So Hashem can't give us a mitzvah of knowing the Hashem Elikim are one in the world of Atsilos. So where does the mitzvah of knowing Hashem is one, Havayahu Elikim, really begin? Only after Malchus Atsilos. So this is where the possibility of that mitzvah begins. And our job is to come at any level we can relate to and deal with, as we'll see in the rest of this section of Tanya, the rest of these chapters, is to see how can we come to that truth and realization and trust the Alter Rebbe. What he says, it doesn't come easy. In the beginning, we thought nothing else exists means there's no other God or no other source. Now we're saying, no. What it means? It means nothing else exists, even this cup of tea, like in Atsilos. Try and come to that awareness. But we don't live with that. And that's why we have two things we're going to introduce called Yichud Allah and Yichud Tata. Yichud Ilah is how it's seen, and this is all to get into our chapter of 7. Yichud Ilah is how the world exists from the level of Atsilos, how it really is. There is no world, nothing else exists. It's all oneness, it's all bottle. Our realm is Yichud Tata. There is a world, and there is a cup of coffee, and there is a Moshe, and there is all of us. But let us realize that all of what we have is nothing and insignificant and nullified before God. So we'll explain that much more later on. But now is when we have the mitzvah of Yichud of Havayahu Elikim, Amonis Alikus, Achdus Alikus, the oneness of Hashem. To understand the oneness of Hashem, that begins after the world of Malchus, after the level of Malchus in the world of Atsilos. So this is just the place that we're coming from. What we're talking about in this the chapters discussing Havayahu and Elikim, discussing that creation is only possible if you have the ultimate revelation of Chesed of Havaya. But once you have that, you can't have any existence because existence can't live before that powerful revelation. So you have to have concealment. So you have to have both Havaya and Elikim going at the same time, which again, their mind can't grasp, but that's the reality. And then we say you should know that Havaya and Elikim are one. This whole Elikim doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, which means no concealment, which means no existence. Because once you have no concealment, nothing can exist, like within the light of the sun. And we say that's the truth of reality in the world of Atsilos. But from Malchus to Atsilos, from Adnaif, and what's the point there? There Hashem wants to have a world where he can come and create the level of being a king. There's a certain joy, there's a certain pleasure that Hashem has from having creations that are not naturally him, not naturally part of God, and those creations recognize themselves as being part of God. When the subjects themselves recognize the king is our identity. So in a king of flesh and blood, it's hard to understand that because I exist outside of the king. You have the king. He eats lunch in his palace, and I eat lunch at home. But by Hashem, recognizing he's the king means you recognize that he's the true source of both existence and sustenance. This is the general idea to have when we get to this point. Just to give a general understanding of this, of the concept, and why this is so important. All of Hasidus really comes to reveal this truth. If you think about all the things we learn in Hasidus, always come and talk about 2 points. That there is Hashem, and there's the world. And our job is to say that Hashem and the world are one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Know that Hashem, who is Elokim, and Hashem, that's the zone is all one. So meaning even the Echad, even the one, the Hashem, and the 7 heavens and the 1 earth, the 4 directions are all one. The idea is that there isn't a disconnect. There's no separation between Hashem and the world. And this is what the ultimate idea of, take the Rebbe's first mimer for an example. The Rebbe's first mimer was Basi Lagani. In Basi Lagani, he says that Avraham went around and he didn't say Keil Ha'olam. He didn't tell everyone there's a God of the world. It's God, the world. In other words, as long as we think that there's a God and he runs and controls and governs and manipulates and directs and controls the world, we're not thinking as Chassidim. We're thinking at a very basic level, which maybe every creation, every guy, every person should think that. To believe as Jews and as Chassidim, it's not that there's a God and there's a world. There's a God and we see him in the form of the world. Everything we see, this is God and it's manifest in the form of Tanya. God in the form of a cup of tea. In other words, there is no other source. Everything comes from Hashem. I don't have it. There used to be a very good metaphor for this, but I can't think of it right now. It's like a projector metaphor, but it's more than that.
So you're saying the correct way would be Kel Olam?
Yeah.
Lo Kel HaOlam?
Right. That's what Avram said. When Avram went around the world, he says, I'll take a vegan of Yakri, and he called Kel Olam. Hashem is God. Everyone translates God of the world. But he's saying Kel Olam, there is no separation, which means whatever we see, this is godliness in the form of a physical world. So our level of Hayichud Tata is to realize, part of it is anyway, it goes much deeper than that, as we'll see as we get to the end of chapter 7. Our level is to be that every single thing that we see, this is godliness. That's the story with the Rebbe Rashab, where we spoke about that. He's going to show us Chassidim how his Becher really is godliness. It looks like a Becher because it appears in that form, but if you look at it, be able to see the truth. The only metaphor that I could use in my mind that helps me understand this is when I think about the idea of atoms. I see a glass cup with a shape and a design and look. But the truth is, if you go down to the atomic level, all you see is moving particles. So which is the real truth? The real truth is that it's a bunch of atoms. How does it appear to us? In a way that I can function. I see a glass cup, it has a walls and a side, and my hand that interacts. Meaning, the truth of its identity is not how I interact with it. And it's healthier for me. Because if I lived at an atomic level, I wouldn't be able to eat food. On my fork, I wouldn't be able to hold it. I'd clump around. I wouldn't be able to live. So it's only by having a concealment that we can function. So it's that concealment that allows us to function, but to know there's atoms. You think this whole world's, no, it's all God. No, whatever you see, there is no separate existence. There's atoms. And there's also the cup. No, the cup's definition is nothing but a collection of atoms. Or as we made the, not the joke, but the anecdote about the 2 twins in their mother's womb, and they're discussing if they believe in mom. What do you mean? I've never seen mom. Everything you see is mom. I don't see mom. You expect to see mom. You'll see a face with a smile, with a hair, and lips and a tall body. But you don't realize that mom sometimes appears as nutrients, and mom appears as oxygen. So when we see everything in the world, we could see it as God of the world, or this is all God. God expresses himself in this way, in a way that we can interact, etc.
Another thing you can think, if it says Kel HaOlam, that means of this world only. There are many.
But good. That's another good point. Yeah, and again, probably in Hasidus, there are many sources talk to all these concepts. I'll just talk about the idea to realize that everything is from Hashem. Okay, so what's the point? So Hasidus explains that everything is about revealing this truth. This is really what life's about. When someone says, "What's our purpose? What's our goal? Why did Hashem create us? Why are we born?" Look around the room. Look around the table. Hashem made all these people, Jewish people, other people. What is the purpose of life? Hashem wants us to reveal this truth. That everything that you see is, first of all, created by God, and second of all, its purpose is godliness. In other words, when we had yesterday or 2 days ago, I think it was yesterday's Hayim. Yesterday's Hayom Yom, I believe it was, where the Rebbe explains Surah Vasatev. What does he say? Turn from evil and do good. What does it mean? It means when you see a physical thing in the world, don't see the physical, which is ra. Why is the physical called evil? Why is it evil? This is not evil. It's nice. It's friendly. Actually, does a good job. It holds up a cup of tea. It's evil if I think it's something not godliness. If I think this exists outside of God, then I'm being evil. It's like as if, imagine all my money comes from one person, and I say, oh, I got this from someone else. No, I gave you all the money you have came from one place. Appreciate and recognize the truth that it all comes from one supplier. There's one person giving you everything you have. I recognize that. If I look at this cup and say it has a separate existence from God, I'm seeing the evil. He says, don't see the evil, the external, see the good, the spark of God within it, and then elevate that by making a bracha. Elevate that by using, when you take a cup of tea and you use it to make a bracha, when you have a bed and you sleep a good night, so you get up in the morning and take care of your family or do your whatever you do to make this world a better place, your bed's being used, everything's being used. Everything, the Rebbe once explained, we mentioned many times, the Rebbe explained to this chassid who came in and said, I understand how a Jew is elevating the world around himself. You make a bracha on your cake and you come to shul. But how about the places in Singapore and Malaysia and places where there's no Jews? How are they being elevated? So the Rebbe said, look into your pocket of your coat. It said made in Malaysia, whatever. He said, when the kids, and not the kids, that's my joke, sorry. When the people in that factory made that coat, and now you go and wear that coat on Shabbos to go to shul, not only are you elevating the entire factory, all those people, but when they had to breakfast in the morning is elevated. Everything they did now comes to perfection. The purpose is, now you see how everything came to this pyramid, to this point for its ultimate purpose. Your coat came to shul on Shabbos. It kept you warm walking to shul. Yeah.
So why is it so hard to see all of that? Why is it that people from way back, from when the earth was created, made other gods, and that seemed to be that's a hard concept for us to even understand. Of course, there's only one God. So why is it so hard? Why is that so difficult?
So the question, first of all, I'll tell you a couple things. Number one, the same question we asked is, so why are there things in this world that go against Hashem? I mean, if everything in this world is made for a purpose, to make this world godliness, why do you have things that go against Hashem? Why do you have things that are evil? Why do you have things that within Judaism and without Judaism? Look at the kings of Judah back in the day. How many they fought against Hashem? They wrote on the door of the temple, "There is no God," and then how people have all these challenges. The reality is that Hashem did bring concealment into the world, and there's two explanations that I've heard. One is because the lower we go into the darkness, into the concealment, into the impurity, the more incredible it is, the transformation when you lift it up. When we go and elevate that, the lower and the darker we go, this is the famous question of Adam and Eve. One of the explanations, there's many explanations of Hasidus. Adam and Chava, what happened here? And the simple conversation is, Hashem tells them, don't eat from the tree. If you do, you're going to die. You're going to be kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And they go and eat from it. Hashem says to Adam, why do you eat from the tree? He said, she told me to. So on the simple level, what is he, like a 2-year-old? She told me to. And there's a lot of talking. One of the answers given to Hasidus is, Hashem said to him, how did you know? How did you know I wanted you to go out of Gan Eden? I wanted you to make the choice to go into the lowest of the world where death exists, where you're going to die, and you're going to have the ability to do all the sins. And in that world, you should go and try and make godliness. How do you know? He's like, I can't take the credit. It was her idea. She told me. That's how Hasidus. In other words, she understood that Hashem said the day you do it, you're going to die. Means, one second, Hashem is telling us that there's a place we can go, which is lower, where we can go there, and there's death, and in that world we can try and do good things. How do we get there? Eat from this tree, and that's your ticket straight to the world, straight to the physical world. So, in other words, Hashem wanted us to go into the darkest place. So He had to create a dark place.
So why didn't He put us there?
One second, because part of the journey is that we have to make the choices to do the accomplishments. But the second part is it has to be through our effort. Hashem could have created us all as angels, but the idea of an angel is so sad. Why is that? Imagine you program. Let's say you have the ability to program your friends, and you could actually chemically or robotically program them to say, "Good morning to you. I love you, the nicest person." And they're only saying because you program them that way. That is so meaningless. Basically, they don't really like you. You just told them to say it. Say it. Hi, I love you. You're smart. You're great. You're beautiful. But imagine the person has a choice. They could say that they don't like you and they don't enjoy your company. And they go, by the way, I want to tell you how much I enjoyed your company today. That means a lot. Why? I once heard from someone, she's not on the class now, but one of her lines was, if you can't say no, what does your yes mean? If you only know how to say yeah, then your yes means nothing. You always say yeah. I want to hear no sometimes, and I know when you say yeah, you mean it. If you can't do evil, if you can't make mistakes, what's the value of the good that you do? It's because we're with a ability to sin and ability to do wrong. Unlike the angels that are pre-programmed, our actions mean something. Hashem says, you know what? You struggled, you overcame yourself, and you did this. That means meaningful. Challenges is what makes something special and valuable and meaningful, like growing your own plans, like a crossword puzzle. Someone can tell you the answers. It makes it much easier. But I want to figure it out myself. Why? I'll make it easier for you. Because the joy is when there's a challenge and you overcome it. Hashem wanted us to have that challenge, but why? So we could be partners in the final plan. So the truth is, it was a gift Hashem gave us. And you know what? I'm going to put you into the world. And it says 3 days ago in the Hayim, actually, Hayim is getting good coverage today. A couple days ago, Hayim, 3 days ago, I think it says, only when Mashiach comes will we realize the value of the gullus days, the exile days, when we had the challenges and the work to try to overcome things and do things that are right. It says we're going to long for those days. Not that we're going to miss it. No one's going to miss gullus. But we're going to wish we could have that experience again. If only had one more chance, it's like the souls that come to heaven and they say they come back to their kids, their grandkids. They say there's no beggars in heaven, there's no tzedakah in heaven, there's no tefillin in heaven. I wish I had a chance to do a mitzvah one more time, and on earth where it was so challenging, I didn't see the benefit. I would have known the benefit of saying a kind word to a person, of holding our mouth shut instead of arguing with my brother. If I would have known the benefit of this, now in heaven it's not here anymore. So while it's true, when all is godliness, it's smooth and easy, but the benefit, the gain, the accomplishment is only there found in the world of corruption, the world of a challenge. And this is the way the world is. Unfortunately, we only see the difficult part, and it is difficult. I remember very clearly, I must have been 17, 18 years old, to talk of the Rebbe, when he said on the verse, it was a fast day, and he says in the verse, Eidcha Hashem ki anaftabi. Thank you, Hashem, for all the suffering. I remember the Rebbe's emotion in this talk. He said, yes, when Mashiach comes, we're going to say thank you. We're finally going to understand. He didn't say, but he meant why there's a Holocaust and why there's pogroms and why there's a massacres. We'll finally understand. But the Rebbe said, but still we're going to say ki anafta was suffering. We're not going to say it wasn't suffering. True, when Mashiach comes, we'll say thank you. It was worth it. It was worth it, but it was suffering. It was hell. It was difficult. It's not going to negate the fact that it was difficult. It's just going to make that it's worth it. Just like you tell a kid that I'm leaving you for 5 minutes now to go to the store to buy you a present, and the kid's crying when you leave. You leave you with the babysitter. I'm telling you, when I come back home, you'll be happy. But I'm crying now. I missed you, but you came back. And this is the mashal it gives. I left you alone for a minute. Hashem says, from when the temple was destroyed till now, I left you alone for a minute. It was a long minute, God's minute. But when I come back, you'll see it was worth it. So the suffering is real, and the pain in this world, and the darkness and concealment. So to answer your question, why is that? That's how Hashem made it. Hashem made the world with so much challenges, because when you overcome those challenges and you accomplish, that's when all the good stuff happens. It's just that, unfortunately, many times we don't see it. And we are, and in the beginning of Tanya, if you remember, the Alter Rebbe explained, one of the reasons why we have such a hard time is because we live in a physical world and all the spirituality is in the book. Reality is, we see and enjoy potato chips and sushi or steak, whatever our particular enjoyment is, and to appreciate words of davening and appreciate the power of a mitzvah doesn't come as easy. It's the first thing. It's not right in front of us. And the second thing is, our animal soul came into the body before the godly soul. We became as babies, we were born with a full-on animal soul, and the full-on godly soul doesn't come till the bas mitzvah or the bar mitzvah. After 12 years, you learned how to take, I come first, I want my food, I'm crying, even the mommy's tired, I'm going to cry, I want a cookie, all the stuff that we do. Only when we're 12 years old, 13 years old, we get the godly soul, and by then we have our nature, we have our instincts, we have our habits. And now as an adult, a young adult, and as you grow, to change those habits and to become more in tune to what's needed and what's right versus what I want, what feels good. That's the journey of life. And it's not fair, because the godly soul got the second start. The animal soul got a head start. Just to conclude today, one more thing on this note, and then tomorrow we're going to go back into the chapter and continue, not tomorrow, next week, continue inside. On this idea of Shema Yisrael that we said, Shema Yisrael is the first verse is 25 letters, is Yichud Ilah. The second verse, Baruch Shem, is 24 letters, and it's called Yichud Tata. And we're going to explain how Shema Yisrael is a higher level of unity, and Baruch Shem is a lower level of unity. And we spoke in the previous classes how these verses came about, why we say it quietly. One interesting thing to note, it says, just to connect this to the 3 weeks the Rebbe says we should discuss laws of the Beis HaMikdash. So to connect it to one interesting thing about the Beis HaMikdash is that the Kohen Gadol had special garments that he wore. And one of them was the hat, the apron, the 12 stones, etc. He also had on each shoulder of the ephod, he had a avnei shayham, onyx stones, and on each of the stones there were two of them, one on the right, one on the left. They were written the names of 6 tribes. That means altogether all 12 tribes were written. What's interesting is they had to write it in a way that the letters on each side equaled 25. So if you take the names of the tribes and you set them up properly, it was a total of 50 letters, all the names, depending how you spell it. And there was 25 on the right, 25 on the left. What does 25 symbolize? The first verse of Shema. The first verse of Shema is 25 letters. And this represents that in Shema you have 2 things. The right is chesed and the left is gevura. Because Shema is said twice, once in the morning, once at night. The morning represents chesed, where the sun is shining and everything is clear and everything is open. And the left, the nighttime, the gevura represents concealment. At nighttime, the sun is not seen. You can't see the world in its full glory. It seems darker. It seems more concealed. And we said the Shema, this idea of the unity of God, this bittul that we say with Shema, has to be done both in a time of right, when you see chesed, and both time of left, when you see gevura. And the concept is, when someone has chesed, when someone has a lot of good in life, it's very easy to forget about God. People think that the more open godly acts in front of you, the more you'll see him. It's not true. We see many people that go through very, very good times, and they forget about God. They say, God, I don't need your blessings, just don't get in my way. I'm doing very well in business, please don't mess it up for me. It's the attitude of I built this. Don't tell me God did this. I built this. And ches and gevura, the darkness, sometimes people feel, even though naturally the feeling is to feel God more when times is difficult. We say there's no atheist in the foxhole. But someone's going through a hard time, concealment, suddenly now I'm praying to God, God, where are you? I need you. You're suddenly having a tough time. But sometimes you can feel abandoned, to feel that God's not with me. God, where's God now? Where is he? So these 2 ideas, to sense the Shema, both in the morning, maybe representing in good times, and both in the evening, when it's not good times, when it's concealed, is the idea of the 2 stones on the right and the left. So talking here about the idea of Shema, the idea of saying the Shema, and the recognition that everything comes from Hashem, is another thing to consider. It's not just said in easy times, and not just at difficult times, but both in the morning and at night we have a mitzvah to say the Shema. And we can think about that next time we do it. We'll stop here, and this was just a sort of recap of because we had such a long break. And next week we will continue inside the Tanya.